Good morning and welcome to the Subcommittee on Rail, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials. Our hearing today will focus on the reauthorization of the Department of Transportation's Pipeline Safety Program, which is administered by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA. We're glad that they're here with us this morning. The United States has the largest network of energy pipelines in the entire world, and they power nearly every facet of our daily activities. In order to ensure that pipelines continue to be the safest and most cost-effective means to transport energy products, diligent oversight of DOT's pipeline safety program is a top priority. Pipelines account for the transportation of 64% of the energy commodities consumed in the United States. Regulators in the private sector. Over the past decade, private entities and the government have taken many steps to ensure the safety of U.S. pipelines. Congress enacted the 2011 Pipeline Safety Bill to strengthen our efforts, and we've been carefully monitoring DOT's progress of completing the remaining mandates from the 2011 Act. This hearing follows two hearings and a roundtable we had last year on these pipeline safety issues. The 2000 law included 42 congressional mandates, of which only 26 are complete. Although PHMSA has released a major rulemaking on hazardous liquids requirements, it is yet to produce several other important rulemakings. Today, we'll hear from PHMSA and other stakeholders on where all the 2011 Act mandates are, and we'll also look towards the next pipeline reauthorization bill, which is a top priority of ours this year. We want to ensure that this legislation provides regulatory certainty for our citizens, the safety of our communities, and for industry stakeholders. The bill is going to be a bipartisan bill, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with our colleagues from the Committee on Energy and Commerce as we move that bill forward. Look forward to hearing from our stakeholders on how we can build on the 2011 Act and what the 2016 reauthorization needs to accomplish. I also look forward to hearing how industry is being proactive in its own safety initiatives to ensure best practices for inspections, detecting leaks, and other important safety initiatives. In closing, I want to thank our witnesses for coming today to explore these issues concerning pipeline safety. I would now recognize the ranking member, Mike Capuano from Massachusetts, for any opening statement he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, what he said. I pretty much agree with all of it, and I especially like the idea of getting a bill out this year. I think we can make a bipartisan bill. I'm looking forward to it, and it'll be wonderful to have. I look forward to hearing our panelists. I particularly welcome my colleagues. I know that each of you have important issues in your districts, and that's why you're here, and I look forward to hearing your testimony, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you. I now call on the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Schuster, who also authored the 2011 Act, which we're talking about here today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and for Mr. Capuano holding this hearing today. I want to welcome our colleagues, which I know each of you have great interest in pipeline safety and hazmat issues that we deal with on this legislation. So thank you for being here. And also, I want to welcome the Administrator Dominguez for her first appearance before the subcommittee. Welcome. Pipeline safety reauthorization is one of the priorities of the committee and certainly of this subcommittee. And I look forward to moving it forward with Chairman Denham and Ranking Member Capuano. As mentioned, I was the chairman in 2011. We passed the last pipeline safety reauthorization. We were also working with our colleagues on the Energy and Commerce Committee to develop this important piece of legislation. In the last bill, we wanted a risk-based, data-driven process at PHMSA. The 2011 Act included a number of significant mandates, but PHMSA is behind in completing them. However, these are complex issues. I want the agency to get the rulemakings right, and I'm glad to see that PHMSA did release one of the major rulemakings on hazardous liquids late last year, and I'd like to hear from them on other items and where they stand. The work on this reauthorization needs to make sure that PHMSA can stay focused on closing out the 2011 Act. I understand that PHMSA is currently undergoing reorganization to become more data-driven in its rulemaking and procedures, which is positive, and I hope to hear how that reorganization will help the agency carry out pipeline safety mission and help PHMSA do a more effective job overseeing pipeline safety. Finally, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record written testimony from the American Public Gas Association, which represents many small communities and gas distribution centers. Again, welcome my colleagues and also the administrator. And without objection.
Without objection.
And I yield back. Thank you, Chairman.
I now call on the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. DeFazio, for any opening statement he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. According to HIMSA, the number of significant incidents involving, gas and hazardous liquid pipelines has increased slightly since 2010. But, pipelines remain one of the safest modes of transport. On average, 288 significant pipeline incidents a year, 13 fatalities, 66 injuries. Those numbers are low, but, PHMSA set a goal of 0. I remember when we had a visionary leader at DOT about 20 years ago talked about 0 fatalities in aviation. People thought that wasn't achievable. Well, we have now achieved it. So I would hope that we can get to the same place with PHMSA in terms of serious incidents and particularly in terms of any future fatalities or serious injuries. Obviously, one incident can cause catastrophic damage. The Enbridge pipeline failure in Marshall, Michigan spilled nearly 1 million gallons of heavy crude. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, they reclassified it as tar sands so they could save money on taxes into the Kalamazoo River. It's been 6 years since that spill, and yet 80,000 gallons of heavy crude tar sands remain embedded in the riverbed along shorelines and not recoverable. That kind of thing is inexcusable. It also went on for quite a period of time because of problems with detection and shutoff, which are issues that are pending with PHMSA. We had the San Bruno event same year, which killed 8 people. That was absolutely an extraordinary incident. So those incidents drove us here to pass the 2011 pipeline safety bill. Unfortunately, many of the mandates in that bill have not been implemented by PHMSA. The automatic shutoffs, which I mentioned a moment ago, leak detection, which I mentioned a moment ago, excess flow valves, the expansion of integrity management requirements beyond high consequent areas. They only issued I just hate this stuff, a notice of proposed rulemaking on October 13, 2015 on the hazardous liquids rule, and that took a year to get out of OMB. The Senate took the wrong approach on this issue. They told PHMSA it couldn't initiate any new rulemaking until all the outstanding pipeline mandates are completed, unless the Secretary of Transportation certifies Congress there's a significant need to move forward. That sounds an awful lot like the tombstone rule that we embedded in the FAA bill a couple of weeks ago, precluding any action to regulate lithium batteries until there's another fatal accident. We shouldn't be tying their hands in the reauthorization bill. I'd like to see us put some things in this bill that actually help them get the job done, and the goals and the objectives and the mandates that we put forward in 2011. Also, I think we could give them authority for emergency order authority, which most other agencies which act for public safety do have. They don't if there's an industry-wide issue, just like the crude by rail issue. So I think there's things we can do to make the agency work better, but I think the Senate really went down the wrong path, and I would hope that we do not choose to follow the Senate in this matter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have 2 panels today. First of all, my esteemed colleagues from the great state of California. We welcome them, Steve Knight, Brad Sherman, and Jackie Spear. After their testimony, we will have the second panel, which is the Honorable Marie-Therese Dominguez, Administrator of PHMSA, Mr. Andrew Black, President and CEO of the Association of Oil Pipelines, Mr. Donald Santa, President and CEO, Interstate Natural Gas Association of America, Ms. Cheryl Campbell, Senior Vice President of Excel Energy, Mr. Carl Weimer, Executive Director of Pipeline Safety Trust. I ask unanimous consent that our witnesses' full statements included in the record. Without objection, so ordered. Since your testimony has been part of the record, the subcommittee would request that you keep your oral testimonies to less than 5 minutes. Mr. Knight, welcome. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the committee for allowing this to happen today. You know, on October 23rd, a national incident happened in my district. It happened to a community where my esteemed colleague lives. It is in the Aliso Canyon gas facility in Porter Ranch, which is in the northern tip of Los Angeles City. We had a leak there that is of proportion that we haven't seen very often in our lifetimes. An amount of gas leaked out of this facility that would fill the Empire State Building every day. This went on for about 4 months until just recently we have been able to cap the well and kill the well. This is a facility that has 115 wells, that has the biggest gas facility west of the Mississippi. One of these wells sprung a leak on October 23rd, and like I said, for 4 months that leak had continued to go. During this time, our priorities were to make sure that the people were taken care of, make sure that as quickly and as safely as possible this leak was going to be capped, and in the future make sure that this wasn't going to happen again. So if there was going to be legislation, we were going to have to work with the state legislators as much as we worked with the federal congressional delegation. We worked with families to make sure that they were relocated. 2 complete schools were relocated. Those kids will stay relocated through the end of the semester. So they will be at 2 different schools until the end of the semester, and then they'll come back to their schools. Over 3,000 people have been relocated during this time frame. And again, this has taken 4 months to fix. We are nowhere near the end of this tragedy. Getting people back in their homes, getting the faith that they are safe, making sure that the other wells have been checked, make sure that there are no other leaks, has been a priority by not just my office, but by Congressman Sherman's office and the local elected folks. The next set of challenges is just this. What do we do at the state level? What do we do at the federal level? I have authored legislation. I know that Congressman Sherman has authored legislation. We're looking at setting standards at the federal level and then making sure that the other 35 or so states that have these types of underground facilities, this underground piping, have some sort of a baseline. Now, states can take it over. In the state of California, we have DOGR, and we have the CPUC, we have the governor's office. They can take these limits and raise them, but there should be some sort of standards. This facility is probably the largest facility in the country. 21 million people have something to do with Aliso Canyon for their gas or for their electricity in the summer. When the leak happened, we found that there were several problems with the mercaptans that went in the air, the benzenes that went in the air. We had kids, we had elderly, we had folks that had nosebleeds, headaches, could not go to work, all of these types of medical problems that happened from the leak. Now, over this next couple months, I vow to work to make sure that we do have these standards in place, make sure that federal legislation sets that bar, that baseline, and to make sure that the state legislators are doing their part. There's already 2 packages moving forward by the senator in the area and by the assemblyman in the area to make sure that they have their standards at the state level. Look, this is a terrible tragedy. It impacted tens of thousands of people in a 5-mile radius. Some people say it's larger than that. I do believe it's larger than the 5-mile radius. This is something that we never want to see again. And this will take months, if not years, to build back the faith that this is a safe facility and to make sure that the people have the faith that we are doing the right thing. Now, next door, there is another facility that is also in my district, and that's Honor Rancho. And that is another facility that's about a quarter as big as Aliso Canyon. So with those 2 facilities, you have the largest underground gas area in the country, and they are within 15 miles. So this is something that impacts not just me, not just Congressman Sherman, but all of the people in the area, the 11 million people that live in LA County. And this is something that we take extremely seriously, and I appreciate you having us here for this, this conference.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Sherman, you may proceed.
Thank you for having us here. For 117 days, the northern Los Angeles community of Porter Ranch was the victim of the largest natural gas leak in American history. My home is about as close as any to a well that leaked 5 to 6 billion cubic feet of methane. Methane plus the mercaptan, which is the odorant, which turns out to be possibly toxic, and volatile organic compounds, including benzene, which is a carcinogen. That's, as Congressman Knight said, a Empire State Building filled with gas every day for 117 days. Over 7,500 families, including my next-door neighbors, have been forced to relocate for months. Schools have been closed, businesses have suffered. The industry subculture was that methane could only be a problem if it burned or exploded, and as long as you were a few hundred feet away, everything was fine. Now we've discovered that a natural gas leak with mercaptan, with or volatile organic compounds, can be an air toxin 5 miles, or Congressman Knight says even further than 5 miles away. The U.S. Department of Transportation's Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA, has established federal safety regulations for natural gas transportation, which my colleague from Northern California will address, but they have no regulations for natural gas storage. Our California regulations are weak. The history will show you of this incident will show you how weak. Wells were drilled in the 1950s, and they were then used to create the 5th largest natural gas facility in the country, located just blocks outside the Los Angeles city limits. It stores 160 billion cubic feet of natural gas. That's roughly 80 billion of working gas, 80 billion of cubic gas. The pipes are eligible for Social Security. That's how old they are. But even in the 1950s, they knew that there should be a subsurface safety valve, and they installed one on well SS-25. In 1979, they took it out and didn't replace it. And here's the bad part. And they were in compliance with the non-existent federal regulations and with the weak state regulations. Because the state regulations just required you have a subsurface safety valve if you were in 300 feet of a home or school. Yet we've learned that this is dangerous 5 miles away. The testing that was required every year was just to determine whether there was actually leaking gas at that moment. No testing to find whether there were anomalies in the pipe and to repair those anomalies. That's why, along with 17 colleagues, I've introduced the Gas Storage Safety Act, and Congressman Knight has a similar bill that would require PHMSA to promulgate and enforce safety standards for natural gas storage facilities. In addition, it creates a grant program to do some research to find a less toxic version of mercaptan, so that we don't put something in the gas for safety and then discovered that it's causing health problems for a 5-mile radius. We need tough national standards. So far, PHMSA has issued an advisory asking, please, pretty please, for the industry to follow the American Petroleum Institute standards. At a minimum, we should immediately require that those standards be followed and then move up from there, not just ask. And if you're concerned that the API standards might be too tough, I've checked with Bernie. The American Petroleum Institute is not a socialist organization. Not only do we have to look at the safety of each storage facility and each well, but you need a robust system. As Mr. Capuano has heard me say many times, too big to fail is too big to exist. This facility by itself provides 80% of the natural gas storage for the LA metro area. So our regulators are told it may not be safe to reopen, but it is necessary to reopen if people are going to generate electricity and be able to heat their homes and heat water in the Los Angeles area. Never again should a major metropolitan area be dependent or so dependent on just one facility. So I look forward to working with you to address this issue. I'm relatively confident my own state will get tough regulations because there's huge political pressure to do so. But this incident needs to be an alarm clock that goes off and is a wake-up call, and it needs to be loud enough to be heard here in Washington, 3,000 miles away. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Ms. Spear, welcome back. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Mr. Chairman, thank you to Ranking Member Capuana and Chairman Schuster. Thank you again for the opportunity to come before you. I was here about a year ago to speak to you about the lax gas pipeline safety measures at PHMSA, and here we are again. It's been 5.5 years since the explosion in San Bruno that killed 8 of my constituents, leveled more than 30 homes, destroyed a neighborhood. And I can't go back to them and face them eye to eye and say that things are any better on the federal level. Once again, we have a bipartisan group of lawmakers who are willing to point out that PHMSA has not yet implemented the most important mandates in the 2011 law. Now, mind you, one of those mandates was to strike the grandfather clause that allows pipes that are older than the 1970s from being subject to any kind of regulation. Now, how difficult is it to strike a line from the existing law? So all of that pre-1970 pipe is still not subject to the kind of rigor that we impose on more recent pipes. It doesn't make a lot of sense. The 2 years that I spent on this issue, working with the National Transportation Safety Board, looking at PHMSA, meeting with the former administrator of PHMSA, has taught me one thing. The relationship between PHMSA and the industry is too cozy, much like the California Public Utilities Commission has too cozy a relationship with the utilities in California. That is really a disaster in the making, as we have seen over and over again. So what we have here is a situation where curbing bad corporate behavior is not a priority. And for all of the people in this country who are concerned about the lack of accountability in our institutions, we don't have to look very far. And PHMSA is a great example. I hope our new administrator is going to shake it up. But when you have a law that's been put into effect back in 2011, and we still don't have the regulations out, you know, shame on us, too, for not just yanking the funding from that agency until they get their act together. Now, I will tell you that there's a litany of disasters that have happened. San Bruno, Mayflower, Arkansas, Porter Ranch in California. What it appears is that these corporations seem to think that destroying people's lives, destroying their homes, destroying the quality of their lives is just the cost of doing business. This cavalier attitude is made worse by a dangerous inconsistency in the law. For hazardous materials, there are criminal penalties for a person who knowingly or willfully or recklessly violates the law. But for gas pipelines, it is only a standard of knowingly and willfully. So you can't actually get to that bad behavior, because even though it's reckless, it's not knowingly or willfully sometimes. This difference has had real consequences, and we only have to look again at PG&E. Just last month, a former PG&E employee said management ordered her to destroy documents and that she found a telltale pre-blast analysis of the San Bruno pipe in the garbage. Now, was that reckless? Was it knowingly and willfully? Maybe knowingly and willfully, but you couldn't be certain. You could certainly call that reckless, but again, that standard doesn't apply. The same holds true for an incident in Carmel, California, just 2 years ago, where PG&E's careless record-keeping practices caused an explosion that flattened a house, which was fortunately vacant. There is plenty of evidence that the current law isn't enough to stop corporate wrongdoing. In 2011, a leak from an 83-year-old cast iron pipe in Allenton, Pennsylvania, I believe in the chairman's district, caused a blast that killed 5 people. In 2012, a gas pipeline explosion outside Charleston, West Virginia, destroyed several properties. The list goes on and on. Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, let those responsible for these tragedies be held responsible for their actions or for their lack of actions. We need PHMSA to be a strong voice for safety, not a toothless tiger and not a lapdog for the industry. And we need a fair criminal statute to ensure that those in industry who are currently apologists for lethal mediocrity are held responsible for the lives they take. Please hold gas pipelines to the same legal standard as hazardous material transportation. I thank you, and I yield back.
I thank each of the members on our first panel. We'll now go to our second panel. I'd like to welcome our witnesses.
Although your experience shows I've got many years in front of me.
And we'll start this morning on our second panel with Administrator Dominguez. Thank you for joining us. We welcome your testimony.
Chairman Denham, Ranking Member Capuano, members of the subcommittee, thank you very much for inviting me to testify today on the reauthorization of the U.S. Department of Transportation's Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration Pipeline Safety Program. PHMSA operates in a dynamic and challenging environment. The demand for our work has increased, as has the complexity and scope of our mission and responsibilities. The development of new energy resources, advancements in technology, and the use of hazardous materials in everyday products impact transportation safety. Recent incidents and increased public awareness and sensitivity to safety hazards and environmental consequences have resulted in increased scrutiny of the agency and a demand that we become proactive, innovative, and forward-looking in all that we do. Addressing the mandates in the Pipeline Safety Act of 2011 is a priority for PHMSA. The act included 42 new congressional mandates to advance PHMSA's safety mission, and we have completed 26 mandates to date. Since I was appointed last summer, we have made progress in addressing 4 outstanding rulemakings from the act, including publishing a final rule on pipeline damage prevention programs and proposing rulemakings on expanding the use of excess flow valves in distribution lines, operator qualification, cost recovery, and accident notification, and a significant rule addressing the safety of hazardous liquid pipelines. We are currently working to issue our proposed rulemaking on natural gas transmission within the next month. Congress has made investments in PHMSA, providing 100 new positions for the pipeline program alone in the last year, and we have filled over 91% of these positions. Moving forward, we must continue to utilize the investments that Congress has provided wisely. Over the past 6 months, I've worked to better understand PHMSA's strengths, capability gaps, and areas for improvement. We have undertaken an organizational assessment that evaluated the agency's structure and processes. This assessment provided PHMSA's leadership team deeper insight into an organization where safety is a personal value for all of our talented and dedicated employees, and highlighted critical investment areas. As a result, PHMSA has updated its strategic framework, recognizing the need to improve our capacity to leverage data and economic analysis, promote continuous improvement in safety performance through the establishment of safety management systems, both within the agency and across industry, and by creating a division that will support consistency in mission execution. This new framework, called PHMSA 2021, was directly informed by PHMSA employees and will allow us to be more predictive, consistent, and responsive as we fulfill our mission of protecting people and the environment by advancing the safe transportation of energy and other hazardous materials that are essential to daily lives of all of Americans. PHMSA 2021 will allow us to better prioritize our work and be proactive in informing, planning, and execution. It will also allow us to be more predictive in our efforts to mitigate future safety issues and to implement data-driven, risk-based inspections, leading our regulated communities in a direction that powers our economy, cultivates innovation, and prioritizes safety. Thank you for continuing to invest in PHMSA. I look forward to continuing to work with the Congress to reauthorize PHMSA's pipeline safety program, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Dominguez. Mr. Black, you may proceed.
Hi, I'm Andy Black, President and CEO of the Association of Oil Pipelines. AOPL represents transmission pipeline operators who deliver crude oil, refined products like gasoline, diesel fuel, and jet fuel, and natural gas liquids such as propane and ethane. I'm also testifying today on behalf of the American Petroleum Institute. Our U.S. pipelines extend over 199,000 miles across the country, safely delivering more than 16.2 billion barrels of crude oil and energy products a year. Pipelines play a critical role in delivering energy to American workers and families. Americans use the energy our pipelines deliver in their cars and trucks to commute to work or drive on the job, provide rural heating and crop drying, and support good-paying manufacturing jobs. The average barrel of crude oil or petroleum products reaches its destination safely by pipeline greater than 99.999% of the time. According to PHMSA data, significant liquids pipeline incidents that could affect high-consequence areas are down 8% over the last 5 years. Significant liquid pipeline incidents per mile that are over 50 barrels in size are down 19% over the last 5 years. But even with these positive pipeline safety performance numbers, the member companies of AOPL and API are constantly working to improve pipeline safety further. Last year, operators completed development of a number of industry-wide recommended practices and technical reports to improve our ability to detect pipeline cracking, integrate safety data, manage safety efforts holistically, manage leak detection programs, and better plan for and respond to pipeline emergencies. This year, we turned to the implementation of these safety recommendations industry-wide. A prime example is our effort to encourage and assist implementation of API Recommended Practice 1173 for pipeline safety management systems. Recommended by the NTSB and developed in conjunction with PHMSA and state pipeline regulators, the tool is helping pipeline operators comprehensively manage all of the safety efforts across the company. The aviation, nuclear power, and chemical manufacturing industries have benefited from safety management systems. Now more pipeline operators are benefiting too. In 2016, pipeline operators will also complete expansion of industry-wide guidance on river crossings, develop a new recommended practice for construction quality management, and update our industry-wide recommended practice for pipeline integrity program management, API RP 1160. This last safety improvement action brings us to last summer's pipeline release near Refugio, California. We echo the words of Transportation Secretary Fox last week, calling the preliminary incident report from PHMSA an important step forward that will help us learn what went wrong so that everyone involved can take action and ensure that it doesn't happen again. Our members are committed to using the lessons learned from the incident to take that industry-wide action to prevent a release like this from happening again. PHMSA's preliminary factual findings could be described as the what of an incident. We expect PHMSA's final report later this year will contain root cause analysis and recommendations describing the still unknown how and why this event occurred. At a minimum, we know there's an opportunity for further industry-wide discussion and perhaps guidance for those operators that use the specific type of pipeline involved with that release, insulated pipe transporting heated crude. As part of our update of RP 1160, industry-wide integrity management guidance, we will ensure that learnings from industry-wide review of that release and PHMSA incident report recommendations are reviewed and incorporated where appropriate. This effort should be finished later this year, more expeditiously than could occur through an agency notice and comment rulemaking process. Turning to the next reauthorization of the National Pipeline Safety Program, there is still much left to do for PHMSA from the 2011 law. PHMSA is working to finalize the liquid pipeline rulemaking, as Administrator Dominguez said. Another PHMSA rulemaking on valves is likely to be proposed this spring. We commend Congress for its recent oversight of PHMSA, which has resulted in the administration releasing several proposals and promising additional ones, and we encourage your continued oversight. PHMSA, under its new leadership, has certainly expressed its resolve to move more expeditiously to meet its statutory and regulatory mandates. Pipeline operators have not stood by and instead have advanced safety initiatives on inspection technology, cracking, data integration, safety, leak detection, and emergency response. With the numerous recent industry initiatives addressing current pipeline safety topics and additional PHMSA regulatory actions still to come, we encourage Congress to reauthorize the pipeline safety program without adding significant new provisions. Thank you for inviting me here, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Mr. Santa, you may proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Denham, Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member Capuano, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Donald Santa, and I'm President and CEO of the Interstate Natural Gas Association of America, or INGA. INGA represents interstate natural gas transmission pipeline operators in the U.S. and Canada. The pipeline systems operated by INGA's 24-member companies are analogous to the interstate highway system, transporting natural gas across state and regional boundaries. My written statement references the numerous pipeline safety efforts that have been undertaken by industry and policymakers over many years. We have a safe industry, but we know we can and should be doing more. In the wake of the natural gas pipeline accident in California in 2010, INGA's board of directors committed the association and its member companies to the goal of zero pipeline safety incidents. While this is a tough, and some would say impossible goal to meet, the emphasis is in the right place, the pursuit of excellence. As progress towards INGA's goal of zero incidents is made, we also want to see regulations finalized that will consistently move us in the same direction. As you know, several key mandates from the 2011 reauthorization have not been completed by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or even proposed for comment. We recognize that these delays have been caused, at least in part, by issues beyond PHMSA's control. We therefore hope Congress will continue to press PHMSA, and more broadly the Obama administration, to accelerate fulfillment of the 2011 mandates. It is worth recalling that the title of the most recent law reauthorizing the Pipeline Safety Act is the Pipeline Safety, Regulatory Certainty, and Job Creation Act of 2011. Regulatory certainty is imperative. INGA has three principal goals for the pending reauthorization. First, we support reauthorization of the pipeline safety program during this Congress at funding levels that are consistent with the recent Senate Commerce Committee action. Establishing authorized funding levels for appropriators to consider remains an important element of legislative oversight. Second, INGA believes that PHMSA in the near term should dedicate the bulk of its rulemaking efforts to completing the 2011 Act mandates. And we hope the Congress will emphasize this imperative in the reauthorization. Many critical regulatory questions remain, and until these questions are answered, it is difficult to move forward on either a voluntary or a compliance basis. Save for the issue I will mention next, PHMSA should focus on eliminating its backlog before moving on to new issues. Our third principal goal, and the one exception to the preceding statement, would be new regulations for underground natural gas storage. INGA identified safety regulations for underground natural gas storage as an area that needed attention as far back as 2011. While the recent accident in California has intensified interest in this issue, the need for federal standards and regulation predated this development. INGA suggests that Congress direct PHMSA to adopt regulations for underground natural gas storage facilities by a date certain, use newly developed consensus standards as the basis for such regulation, and allow PHMSA to fund this regulation through new user fees assessed on storage operators. The Senate legislation and several House bills would meet these objectives. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the subcommittee.
Good morning, Chairman Denham and members of the committee. My name is Cheryl Campbell, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Gas for Xcel Energy. We provide the energy that powers millions of homes and businesses across 8 western and midwestern states. Headquartered in Minneapolis, We're an industry leader in responsibly reducing carbon emissions and producing and delivering clean energy solutions from a variety of renewable sources at competitive prices. Today, I am testifying on behalf of the American Gas Association, which represents more than 200 local distribution companies, also known as LDCs, which serve more than 71 million customers. AGA's member companies operate 2.5 million miles of underground pipelines, safely delivering clean, affordable natural gas to residential, commercial, and industrial customers. LDCs provide the last critical link in the energy delivery chain, connecting interstate pipelines directly to homes and businesses. Our focus every day is ensuring that we keep the gas flowing safely and reliably. As part of an agreement with the federal government, most states assume primary responsibility for safety regulation of LDCs, as well as intrastate transmission pipelines. State governments are encouraged to adopt minimum standards promulgated by the U.S. Department of Transportation. Many states also choose to adopt standards that are more stringent than the federal rules. Additionally, our companies are in close contact with state pipeline safety inspectors, and we work in a collaborative manner that provides for far more inspections than required under federal law. LDCs do not operate strictly in a compliance culture, but rather in a culture of proactive, collaborative engagement. Each company employs trained safety professionals, provides ongoing employee evaluations and safety training, conducts rigorous system inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, and replacement programs, and educates the public on natural gas safety. AGA's commitment to enhancing safety, adopted in 2011, provides a summary statement of those commitments. And as an aside, AGA member companies have included the API recommended practice for storage fields, API 1170 and 1171. It was recently approved by the board and incorporated in what was in my written testimony. The association has also developed numerous pipeline safety initiatives focused on raising the bar on safety, including peer-to-peer reviews and best practice forums that share best practices and lessons learned throughout the industry. Each year, LDCs spend approximately $22 billion on safety. Approximately half of that are on voluntary activities. The Pipeline Inspection, Protection, Enforcement, and Safety Act of 2006 and the Pipeline Safety, Regulatory Certainty, and Job Creation Act of 2011 both outline several programs that help continue to improve the safety of the industry. AGA member companies have implemented aspects of these programs either through DOT regulations or on a voluntary basis. Many of these programs are in their infancy in terms of implementation, and we encourage Congress to allow these programs to develop and mature in order to realize their full impact. In the case of the unanimously passed 2011 Act, which dealt with a number of key issues, several of the required regulations have yet to be promulgated or finalized. Progress is being made, and thus we strongly encourage the committee to be judicious in making major changes to the law at this time. PHMSA has issued a number of significant guidance documents, released the results of a congressionally mandated study on leak detection, and created a database to track progress in replacing cast iron and bare steel pipelines. Likewise, the industry, NARUC, state regulators, and state legislators have combined to produce significant pipeline safety improvements over the last several years. We should continue building on that record. With regard to the replacement of cast iron mains, the quantity of these mains continues to steadily decrease and now make up less than 2% of the overall inventory in the nation. The industry estimates that it will cost over $80 billion to complete this replacement. Natural gas utilities are working with our legislators and regulators to accelerate this process. And today, 39 states and the District of Columbia have adopted specific rate mechanisms that facilitate accelerated replacement of pipelines no longer fit for service. The cumulative result of all these important actions is that industry is replacing cast iron pipe as well as bare steel as quickly as possible in a safe and cost-effective manner. In addition to what I have highlighted today, my written testimony provides industry updates on incident notification, data collection, and information sharing, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Good morning, Chairman Denham, Ranking Member Capuano, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to speak today on the important subject of pipeline safety. The Pipeline Safety Trust came into being after a pipeline disaster that occurred nearly 17 years ago. At that time, we were asked by the federal courts to create a watchdog organization over both the industry and the regulators. We have been trying to fulfill that vision ever since, but the increase in the number of significant incidents over the past decade, driven primarily by releases from liquid pipelines from causes well within pipeline operators' control, makes us sometimes question whether our message is being heard. Today, I would like to dedicate my testimony in the memory of Peter Hayes, who I met shortly after a Chevron pipeline dumped oil into Red Butte Creek in Salt Lake City. Mr. Hayes, a school teacher, was raising his family in a home that sat on the banks of Red Butte Creek, and he was extremely concerned about the possible long-term health effects to the people in that area who were not evacuated and experienced many different health systems associated with exposure to crude oil. He pushed hard for better emergency response and for someone to follow up with a study to determine whether people so exposed would experience any long-term health effects. No one ever did such a study, and in a tragic twist of fate, Mr. Hayes came down with a rare lung disease that may in part be caused by such exposure to environmental pollutants. He died last year. The need for studies on the health effects from exposure to oil spills has long been a void in our pipeline safety system and was recently again called for by a National Academy of Science panel. Often in these hearings, the focus is on how PHMSA has failed to implement various mandates or move too solely on regulatory initiatives. While we agree that those things are all important and certainly fair game at such hearings, today we would like to focus our testimony on how the pipeline safety system that Congress has created also has much to do with PHMSA's inability to get things done. PHMSA can only implement rules that Congress authorizes them to enact, and there are many things in the statutes that could be changed to remove unnecessary barriers to more effective and efficient pipeline safety. The pipeline safety statutes are the responsibility of Congress, and today we will speak to issues where Congress needs to act if there is a real desire to improve pipeline safety. Some of the things that Congress could change fairly easily would be to provide PHMSA with emergency order authority like other transportation agencies have. This would allow PHMSA to quickly correct dangerous industry-wide problems, such as the lack of minimum rules for underground gas storage or the lack of valid verification for maximum allowable operating pressures. At the same time, by eliminating the unique and duplicative cost-benefit requirements in the pipeline statute, normal rulemakings could proceed at more than the current glacial speed. Congress also needs to harmonize the criminal penalty section of PHMSA statutes so in the rare case when pipeline companies willfully or recklessly cause harm to people or the environment, they can be prosecuted as necessary. And Congress should also add a strong mandamus clause to allow federal courts to force PHMSA to fulfill their duties when it is the agency dragging its feet. The National Academy of Sciences, as I mentioned earlier, recently completed a congressionally mandated study that showed there were a number of serious issues with the way PHMSA oversees spill response planning and the contents of those plans. We hope you will rapidly move to ensure that PHMSA is reviewing these plans not only for completeness, but also for efficacy, as other agencies do, and require companies to provide clear information so first responders know what they are up against. We also ask that you honor the memory of Peter Hayes and request an additional study by the National Academy of Sciences to help alleviate the lack of information about how to better protect people from the short and long-term health effects of pipeline failures. Finally, we have a few concerns with the language included in the reauthorization bill that the Senate has been working on and hope you can address these concerns in your own bill. In particular, we think the wording in the statutory preference section of the Senate bill may actually slow needed rules. We also think the language regarding underground gas storage needs to be clarified to ensure that an open rulemaking process happens and that whatever is passed allows states to set stricter standards for facilities within their borders. And finally, we think the language in that bill regarding small LNG facilities pushes PHMSA too much to rely on industry development standards and hard to enforce risk-based systems. I see my time is about up, so I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'd be glad to answer questions now or in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Weimer. one of the things that we're going to be struggling with, or at least having a great deal of discussions about as we're finalizing and continuing to work on our reauthorization bill, is the 2011 bill. 46 different mandates, only 26 of them are completed already. I know that there's some work in progress on some of those, but before we get into those mandates themselves, you and I, Ms. Dominguez, have talked about the reorganization. You didn't touch on that much in your opening testimony. I was hoping you could expand upon that a little bit now, but specifically how the reorganization is going to help you to meet these 2011 mandates.
Thank you, Chairman Denham. There's two things that we're looking to do at PHMSA. One, we've created a strategic framework that addresses our ability to actually be more proactive, to look at market trend analysis, understand what's occurring in a very changing energy environment. Clearly, the energy market in this country has fundamentally transformed over the last few years, let alone the last decade. And in an ability for PHMSA to remain cutting edge, to actually be more proactive and more predictive, we want to establish two particular offices that will help drive information collection, data analysis, and a more rigorous economic analysis of our regulatory framework. So bottom line, create two positions. One would be a executive director position, which would be a career position at the agency. That would help drive operational consistency, application of our programs, and really be the force that drives, again, consistency across the agency. The other one is an office of planning and data analysis. That would be the place where we would actually do more performance-based planning, look at doing a whole bunch of data collection and analysis that would inform our rulemakings, but also inform the way we are better informing our regulations, so that one, we're timelier in our regulations. We're not looking to see what's down, we're looking to see what's down the road and knowing what the energy market is providing and being more predictive. And so that we've got the data, we're ready to go, we can do some rigorous economic analysis and move regulations forward in a more rigorous way. We're not waiting to collect data, we're not being reactive to situations, but we're actually being more forward-leaning. So that's the intention with the reorganization.
Thank you. Well, with that reorganization now put in place, we would ask you to give us a little more definitive timelines on the 26 mandates that are not complete yet. The hazardous liquid rule, I think you had said that was going to be done in the next several months. If you could define that specifically down and give us a better idea of when specifically that one will be done. And then we can go through, I know you had some timelines on some of the 26. We would expect a timeline on all 26.
So in particular, the hazardous liquid rule was, the notice of proposed rulemaking was published on October 13th of last year. Comments were received in January, and we are in the process, the advisory committee met in February. We are in the process of finalizing that rule right now. We are going through not just the comments, but working through all the details of the hazardous liquid rule. We hope to submit that shortly to the department for final review, and then it will go to OMB, and we'd hope to publish it in the coming months as a final rule. That's the hazardous liquid rule. The other very important rule that I think that is pending from the 2011 Act is the gas transmission rule. The gas transmission rule has been something that I've personally worked to. Both the hazardous liquid rule and the gas transmission rule are two of the most significant rulemakings that have been in the works since I've come on board. Again, we got the hazardous liquid rule going. We're also doing the same on the gas transmission rule. We literally hope that within a matter of weeks here, we'll be publishing the notice of proposed rulemaking on the gas transmission rule. That will include a number of the requirements that are in the mandate from the Act of 2011, and hope to cover those.
Thank you. My time's expired. Now recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the panel today. Ms. Dominguez, have you got the authority right now to immediately implement the API standards relative to underground storage facilities?
We do have the authority to promulgate rulemaking.
No, that's not what I asked. Do you have the authority to immediately implement them right now?
We have the authority to take these standards and turn them into rules, yes.
All right, so that's answer my question. I'm trying to be friendly.
Yes, we do.
You have to do it right now, not a rule that takes 2 years to get passed because OMB doesn't do a damn thing.
There's
But
so,
I know, you don't have to comment on that last part.
so there's different standards for rulemaking. So it's meant to be, as you know, a methodical process. If we were to go to
No. I just want to know one simple thing. Do you have the authority right now to go back to your office and implement the API standards for underground gas tanks starting now?
no,
Why not?
because we have to go through a rulemaking process, and that would
Because you do not have emergency order authority, is that
Correct.
right? If you had that authority, could you do it?
if we had, yes.
Okay, so I say that because I think you should have emergency or order authority. Corrective action authority takes too damn long and jeopardizes people's lives when we know there is a problem. When there's a problem, like the one we know about in California, I think thoughtful regulators should have the ability to immediately implement, especially standards that are already accepted by the industry. And to have to wait any longer than that is crazy. We need to get emergency order authority into this legislation. And I guess I want to go to Mr. Santa. Mr. Santa, my colleague, Ms. Spear, made a comment that PHMSA and the utility companies and others are a little bit too cozy. Do you agree with that?
No, sir, Mr. Capuano, I do not agree with that.
Okay.
I believe we are the regulated entities. We are subject to their authority.
Just out of curiosity, on one of my concerns is that, as I understand, I read an article from the San Francisco Chronicle, actually several years old now, that basically said two-thirds of the studies conducted by PHMSA are funded by the utility companies themselves that PHMSA regulates. And when you fund a study, and I don't mind some funding that's blind funding, that doesn't bother me. That happens all the time in business. But when it's not blind funding, but when the funder is the regulated person who also then manages the study, who can have faith that that study is neutral and not self-serving and it doesn't look a little too cozy?
Sir, first of all of PHMSA's funding comes from user fees that are assessed from the
I don't have a
industry.
problem with the funding as long as it's blind funding.
And also, PHMSA has advisory committees that include representatives not only from the regulated entities, but also
All well
from
and good.
state-
Advisory
state
committees are
state
good.
regulators, public advocates such as Mr.
You don't
Weimer.
think there's a problem when a regulated entity, not just here, but any regulated entity, also not just pays for, but then hires and conducts the study that then says what safety regulations should be? Who's the regulator? That doesn't happen in any other industry. I happen to come from a district where research is what we do. More than any other segment of this country, or in fact the world, research is done in my district and are funded all the time by private companies. Don't have a problem with the funding. Those private companies fund them in a blind study so that they can't so they can't affect the outcome. That doesn't mean they're not advised. It doesn't mean that their opinions aren't listened to. It means that they can't control the study. Therefore, we can have faith in the results that those studies are at least the opinions of independent scientific research, as opposed to simply self-serving anointments by the very people who are trying to get something done. You don't think that's a problem?
Mr. Capuano, I think that it's important for the process to have integrity. And I think that if PHMSA believed that what was being produced did not have that integrity, it has the ability to conduct it in
There you go, Ms. Dominguez. We'll be talking again. These are not my favorite forums. I prefer roundtables so we can have discussions. But when it comes to these studies, expect to be talking to me about how we can, again, it's not the funding, and I'm not about advising. I actually think that's important. It's about making sure that the results of those studies are independent and seen as independent by the rest of the world. And I think without that, those studies are maybe not worthless, but become very suspect, and the agency becomes very suspect as being seen as too cozy with the people it regulates. With that, my time is expiring, and I thank the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Capuano. Mr. Hanna.
I yield my time back to the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hanna. Ms. Dominguez, what role does PHMSA play in regards to underground gas storage currently?
With regard to underground gas storage, we have worked for many years with the states and looked primarily to the states to regulate in this area. Given the incredible occurrences at Aliso Canyon, I actually had the opportunity to go out there and visit last week with Secretary of Energy Ernie Moniz and take a look firsthand at what happened. And it's very clear that there is a role for the federal government to play in terms of regulating underground storage. There's been a lot of work that's been done, including development of 2 recommended practices in this area, one for reservoirs and one for salt caverns that could be addressed moving forward. In doing so, we would actually look work very comprehensively with the states to make sure that we worked with them and understood some of their particular geologic formations.
If you rely on the states, does that not create a patchwork across the country?
I think the bottom line is if PHMSA has the authority to actually set federal regulations in this area. If we did that, that would be in doing so, as we move forward in regulating in this area, we would set the minimum standards. The states have every ability to go above and beyond those standards and actually provide more details that are specific to their states, specific to their concerns, whatever their geologic formations may be. But again, they can go above our minimum requirements.
Currently, PHMSA's authority stops at the pipeline, even though the pipeline goes into the reservoir?
Currently, our authority stops at the wellbore. We don't go downhole at all.
Thank you. You recently sent out a safety advisory in response to the Aliso Canyon underground gas storage. Can you tell us about the advisory, why you sent it out, what the goal of the advisory was?
We issued an advisory opinion on February the 5th to all operators of natural gas storage facilities. We asked the operators to review their operations, identify potential leaks and failures, identify any threats, whether it's corrosion, chemical or mechanical damage, any kind of material deficiency that they may have. The advisory bulletin also asked operators to look at the location and operations of any kind of shutoff valves or isolation valves that they may have and make sure that they're testing their emergency plans as well. So it was a fairly comprehensive advisory bulletin out to all operators of underground storage across the country.
Thank you. Ms. Campbell, Representative Steve Knight has introduced an act that would authorize minimum federal standards. What position does AGA and the industry take on that proposal? And what federal standards do you think would be helpful in this area?
AGA supports the adoption of the API standards for natural gas storage fields as a federal minimum standard, and also the ability of the states to add additional standards as they deem necessary for their area.
And does AGA support Mr. Knight's bill?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Santa, pipeline safety is a partnership between PHMSA and the states. PHMSA sets standards for interstate facilities, and states take those standards and apply them to interstate facilities. Could you describe how preemption works? Are the states able to retain the flexibility with interstate pipeline safety while still meeting federal standards?
Mr. Chairman, the states with regard to the regulation of intrastate natural gas transmission pipelines and distribution pipelines can go beyond the federal standards if they are consistent with them. However, with regard to interstate facilities, facilities that are operated by the members of INGA, we are subject to the PHMSA promulgated standards. There are some instances in which PHMSA, I believe, has delegated to states the ability to do inspections However, enforcement is within the province of PHMSA as the federal regulator over interstate facilities.
Thank you. I yield back. Mr. Larson, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to welcome Carl Weimer here today. He's also a Whatcom County Council member in my district, and Pipeline Safety Trust is located in a top floor of a renovated house in downtown Bellingham, Washington, and they do a lot with a little, and so welcome, Carl. And I also have a few questions for you as well, as it happens. Didn't want you to fly all the way out here and not have any questions asked of you. But the San Bruno disaster is an example where emergency order authority could have addressed some systematic deficiencies immediately. And we've talked a little bit about emergency order authority. Are there other instances that you believe would back up an argument for emergency order authority?
Yes, certainly. Thank you for the question. There's been a number of incidents in the last 10 years that I can think of. You know, San Bruno was a good example where it became apparent that that particular company was not interpreting the rules correctly. We heard from other companies around the country, perhaps they weren't either, but through the corrective action order, the PHMSA could only deal with PG&E. They couldn't deal with industry-wide. That's where emergency orders could step in. We've seen certain types of pipe that it's become after accidents obvious that it's a problematic type of pipe. You can correct the one company that's dealing with the pipe, you can't correct things industry-wide. So emergency order authority would allow PHMSA to move forward on things rapidly to correct things that become known to be an industry-wide problem.
Is there a reason that you've looked at why PHMSA doesn't have it versus these other federal agencies that do have emergency order authority?
I don't know why it's not in the statute. I know there's other agencies like the Federal Railroad Administration that do have that authority. I think some others do also, and it certainly is needed.
Yeah. Do you have experience with the state inspection program in Washington State?
Yes, I'm actually appointed by the governor to be on an oversight committee of that program.
Yeah, and how does that work in terms, is that working in Washington State in terms of PHMSA delegation on inspection?
It is, and that's one of the areas where the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission actually has a citizen-led pipeline safety committee that looks at what the industry and what the regulators are doing, and it works pretty well. And I think that gives an added layer in Washington State of inspectors looking at interstate pipelines. As Mr. Santa said, they can't set regulations that go above what the minimum federal standards are, but it does give us another layer of inspectors. And I think the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission takes that and does a lot of added value to that. Like they post all of the inspection results for both interstate and intrastate on their pipeline, on their website. You know, I think that's the only state that I know of that posts actually the inspection results.
Yeah. And finally, for you, can you comment on the funding pipeline safety information grants to communities and what the law allows and what we're doing now for that?
Right, I think that was a grant program that was authorized in the 2002 bill. We helped push that through. It's a fairly small grant program that allows communities to hire technical expertise to help them understand pipeline issues. Lots of good stuff has come out of it. A lot of communities have upgraded their GIS systems, so their public works people and their emergency responders actually understand where pipelines are in those communities. Done a lot of first responder training, call before you dig training. It's allowed in particular communities that have a concern with a particular pipeline to hire an expert to come in. We recently did one of those in California in the East Bay area where a neighborhood association asked us to come in and look at it, and they had a very big concern with a particular pipeline owner. When we looked at it, we pointed out to them that particular pipeline probably wasn't as high a risk as they thought, but we pointed out some issues where local governments really needed to think about how they were training their emergency responders, and school districts that had pipelines running right next to schools had never thought about evacuation plans for that. So I think it's been a valuable program that helps build trust in pipeline safety.
Thanks. And Ms. Dominguez, can you comment on the state program and what your plans are for that in this what do you call it, PHMSA 2021 plan?
The state program has been a very successful program. It is our way to actually work very directly with the states, and we want to make sure that not only is that continues to be a robust program where the state inspectors carry out as was stated, the federal requirements, but then go above and beyond what any particular state requirements may be. Hope to continue to reinvest in that and make sure that it's just as robust moving forward.
Well, I appreciate hearing that as you're moving forward and reorganizing that
Absolutely.
stays a major part of what you do. Thank you. Yield back.
Mr. Nolan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the panel for being here, particularly welcome Ms. Campbell from our great Minnesota-based company, the great work that you do. We're very proud of that company and all of its performance standards and services that you provide. Thank you for being here. I want to bring to the attention of the committee, as well as the panel, something that has not been brought up here. So I want to give the committee a little heads up on it when we get around to the markup. And that is the Pipeline Jobs and Safety Act that I have introduced into the Congress here, and want the committee to carefully consider. And for a variety of reasons. But first of all, what the bill would do, and I intend to offer it as an amendment if given the opportunity, is to require that steel tubular goods produced and used in the pipeline industry after the enactment of our reauthorization be required to be U.S. steel and made from products that are mined and processed, quite frankly, here in the United States. I do so for several reasons. First is not necessarily in order of importance either, but one of them is the economics of it. We have 15,000 steel workers in America that are on the bench and unemployed at this moment. They estimate for every one of them there's another 6 or 7 people who are laid off. Grocery stores closed down and drugstores closed down and communities devastated and families devastated. By that standard, there's probably at least 120,000 people who are suffering. Clearly, it's in our national interest to have a strong and viable steel industry for this country. 13% of the nation's gross national product goes through the locks at the Sioux Narrows, which gives the Lake Superior access to the Great Lakes. They say that if that lock, for example, were devastated for one reason or another, obsolescence, which quite frankly is a possibility, it is greatly in need of repair. They have Army protection there against war or acts of terrorism. They say if that lock, for any reason, including the collapse of American mining and steel, were not there, it would throw the country into a Great Depression with 13% of the nation's gross national product going through that. But of equal and great importance is the safety factor. In talking with the men and women who do the welding and do the construction of these pipelines, I know it's anecdotal, but they have attested time and again to the superior quality of U.S. steel. I did some work myself in the pipeline industry in my youth, selling pipelines in the Middle East, and the smart ones all wanted to use U.S. steel, even though it was cheaper some other places, but because of the superior quality and the benefits that related to that with regard to production and safety. But I've also seen a number of studies where expert analysts, have looked at U.S. steel and tubular goods in particular, compared them to the steel that's produced in some of these other countries. And clearly, U.S. steel always ends up being superior. And then lastly, I've seen some studies and analysis that show that while imported steel and tubular goods in particular are required to meet U.S. standards, the fact is they're not inspected and they're not regulated the way U.S. steel is in its production process. So there's an important safety factor here. 30% of the steel that's being used in this country comes from foreign countries, steel of an inferior quality. And so I want to just give everybody a heads up on the importance of this and my intentions to pursue it, given the opportunity under the new regular order proceedings that Speaker Ryan is calling for, which of course calls for open rules and committee consideration of any and all things that emanate from this Congress of the United States. And I applaud Speaker Ryan for calling for the reestablishment of regular order. That's how we find common ground. That's where we come together. That's how we produce a nonpartisan, bipartisan legislative efforts that fix things and get things done for this country. So thank you for the moment, and thank you for your testimony, and look forward to working with the members of the committee and the industry and all the workers and people involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. I recognize Mr. Barletta for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my district and across the state of Pennsylvania, we are rooted in the heart of the Marcellus Shale. I've seen new access to cheap natural gas prices lower my constituents' heating and electricity bills, bring new manufacturing to our area, and save jobs at power plants that would have been shut down by the President's war on coal. During the height of the Marcellus Shale boom, we had more than 1,000 wells drilled, but no way to move the gas to markets. That's like being in college and having a keg of beer without a tap. Still, energy costs in surrounding states remain high and have not been able to take advantage of the cheap energy in the Marcellus Shale because of the lack of pipeline infrastructure. Now, in my district, we have multiple pipelines in the process of being built, and this has raised my constituents' awareness of both the new and old pipelines in their communities. Ms. Campbell, you mentioned significant investment in repair and replacement programs that focus on updating the old cast iron infrastructure. Can you explain the steps natural gas companies are taking to ensure that the pipeline infrastructure that is already in the ground is safe?
Certainly. You know, it kind of comes in a lot of different categories. It depends on what service it's under, but effectively, there's a pretty rigorous process of inspection. Transmission lines have a very prescriptive process that we go through to ensure that they're safe. And when you find an issue or problem, they're classified to be repaired immediately or during a certain time period. For our distribution systems, there are regular requirements for inspection, leak surveys, for instance, cathodic protection surveys, things of that nature. And again, pipeline companies, operators take action based on what they see. In a number of instances, companies go above and beyond those minimum requirements. When you believe you have an issue or a risk that needs to be addressed, we might, for instance, do additional surveys, leak surveys. We might proactively replace pipeline. We also, by the way, watch carefully what PHMSA puts out on its websites and watch what other companies are finding, lessons learned from other companies, and investigate our own infrastructure and determine whether or not we need to take proactive action based on the results of those other issues.
Thank you. Administrator, at a field hearing last September in Billings, Montana on pipeline safety, you stated that PHMSA would issue a proposed rulemaking on the safety of natural gas transmission by the end of 2015. While that deadline wasn't met, I was glad to read in your testimony that you are moving forward with this rule and that it should be complete within a month, which I take it to mean March 25th, 2016. Is that correct?
We are working diligently on it, and I really do hope that it's out within the next few weeks here.
Now, my constituents, energy companies, and I, we all need these deadlines to be met, and for PHMSA to issue its guidance so that we can be confident in the quality of our energy infrastructure safely. How are you prioritizing this and other rules in light of the action needed to respond to recent incidents, as well as the many new and ongoing pipeline projects in Pennsylvania and across the country?
Thank you for the question. We have, as I stated in my testimony, completing the requirements of the 2011 Act are absolutely a priority for PHMSA. we are addressing some of the most significant ones first, including the hazardous liquid rule, which we've moved last fall, and now with the gas transmission rule are doing the same. That said, there's always ongoing emerging risk that is identified in different ways. Just recently, underground storage is clearly on the table now, given the incident in Aliso Canyon. So the bottom line is that PHMSA actually needs to not only be an agency that addresses risk, we actually need to be more forward-thinking and be able to identify some of these emerging trends before they actually occur. And part of the PHMSA 2021 strategy is actually to make sure that we have those capabilities in place. We're able to move forward with some aggressive rulemaking and do it in a timely way.
And quickly, for those of you in the private sector building infrastructure right now, have you made your long-term capital infrastructure plans absent the guidelines that has continually been delayed, and when you don't know the regulatory challenges down the road? And we'll have to be quick because my time's expiring here.
Might I respond to that, Mr. Barletta?
Sure.
We are committed to our safety commitments and goal of zero incidents. By the same token, I think there is some risk when you do not have the standards out there. For example, some of the testing that must be done is expensive. It requires taking pipelines out of service. And there is the risk that, for example, a pipeline company might test pursuant to the voluntary program and then find out when PHMSA puts out the rules that it needs to repeat that because it didn't quite meet it. So I think that having that certainty of knowing that what we are committed to do is consistent with what PHMSA will require of us and the rules, I think would be very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Barletta. Ms. Hahn, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Demon, for holding this hearing. As the chairman knows, and actually called for another hearing on an issue specifically related to my district in Los Angeles. We had a pipeline spill 2 years ago in Wilmington, a working class community near the Port of Los Angeles. Over 1,000 gallons was spilled into this residential neighborhood. I remember running over there that morning of the spill, and the smell was so nauseating. And then the residents had to deal with jackhammers tearing up the streets to locate the leak. Some people couldn't even get out of their houses because of the heavy equipment on a residential street to even go to work. At the time of the rupture, there was confusion over the classification of the pipeline. Phillips 66 had classified this pipeline as idle, a category that apparently does not exist. When they bought the pipeline, they were told by the previous operator that it was empty. The state of California and PHMSA were told it was empty. So in 15 years, it was never inspected. No one ever verified that the pipeline was empty. And my residents, of course, paid a price for that. I think that oil spill endangered the health and safety of many of my constituents, as well as property damage. So I'm reintroducing legislation today that will ensure that a company purchasing a pipeline does its due diligence and inspects the status of the pipelines they purchase. I think it's reasonable to say within 180 days of the sale, but I believe there needs to be a third-party verification by either PHMSA or a state authority. And I hope, Chairman Denham, you'll work with me as we reauthorize PHMSA to maybe include this in the legislation. The other thing that really upset me and my residents was, at the end of the day, Phillips was only fined $75,000 for this egregious act of misidentifying a pipeline, making up a category of idle, and causing enormous health and safety risk to my constituents. So, Administrator Dominguez, I've been asking for better oversight of our pipelines. Can you share with us today of how you believe PHMSA has improved pipeline oversight, particularly instances like this?
Thank you for the question. I think that I think there were a lot of lessons learned as a result of the incident that occurred in your district. First and foremost, our regulations require there's no, as you stated, there's not an idle pipeline. It's either operating or it's not operating, and the requirements need to be met for both of those incidents. So moving forward, you know, again, there were a lot of lessons that were learned and applied, and how we can actually better work with operators, both.
But how have we closed that loophole? You know, without my legislation, how have we closed the loophole of a company purchasing a pipeline and just sort of having the previous owner say it's empty?
Well, there are requirements in place right now for how any operator actually uses their pipeline. So if it's not in quote-unquote current use, the bottom line is that there are requirements for how it's supposed to be operating. So if it's not filled with a particular gas or liquid, there are requirements, especially in a liquid situation, for how it should be treated. And so,
And what is the verification of a purchased pipeline by a new operator? Is there a third party? Is it you? Is it the state? Who says whether or not everybody's telling the truth?
I'm not aware that there's an actual verification process of that, but I'd be happy to look at it.
Good, thank you, because I think that's what, you know, our constituents are hoping from the federal government, that we sort of have this third-party verification. You know, one of the other issues was, particularly in Wilmington, in very populated Los Angeles County, this is considered a high-consequence area because there are so many underground pipelines running underneath the streets of this residential community. And last year, I asked the acting PHMSA administrator about pipelines in these so-called high-consequence areas. Do you know if we've made any progress to increase the safety in these high-consequence areas, besides just alerting them to evacuation procedures?
For both, certainly in the hazardous liquid rule, we looked at how we actually address incidents of liquid in high consequence areas, but also as we move forward in the gas rule, we're also looking to identify opportunities that will look at all kinds of consequences.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Mr. Micah, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. First for Ms. Dominguez. Recently, API and AOPL released some new recommended practice for improving safety management systems. Did you participate in the development of those recommended practices?
Yes, we did.
You did?
Absolutely.
And maybe I could ask Mr. Black, can you take a minute and maybe tell us the safety management systems, describe what you've recommended and how you think they'll improve safety of pipelines?
This was an extraordinary effort done under the American Petroleum Institute, recommended by the National Transportation Safety Board, to develop a safety management systems program unique to pipelines. We worked with PHMSA. PHMSA staff participated at every step of the way. The NTSB had the opportunity to watch it as it moved. We brought state regulators along, and also our companions in the gas transmission distribution sector.
Specifically, that's, okay, where everybody was cooperating.
Sure.
Tell me specifically what safety recommendations and how those, again, what we'll see and what you expect the results to be.
Thank you, Congressman. It provides guidance to a company on how to manage safety efforts holistically across the company, from line managers to line employees, middle managers, to CEOs, and how to continuously improve. It's got a continuous cycle of plan, do, check, and adjust. And PHMSA has cheered us on. It's encouraged every pipeline operator to implement that. One of our major initiatives this year is to try to make every company aware of it and to educate them and encourage their implementation.
And that's a voluntary compliance?
Yes.
Okay. And PHMSA feel, I guess they've checked off, so you all are on the same page, and you feel that, again, this will provide us a better measure of safety?
Well, we know that PHMSA is watching carefully. We know the NTSB said that this effort exceeded its exceeded its expectation. PHMSA has said in settings that safety management systems require companies to go beyond prescriptive regulations, and the worst thing you could do right now is to try to just somehow measure compliance with a safety management system.
But the compliance is strictly voluntary. This is not mandated by PHMSA, is it? You haven't incorporated this into your mandate?
No, we haven't, but what we've
You're using
I've
this
made-
as the standard, new standard, and evaluating on that basis, and then what do? Write them up if they aren't meeting the standard, or what?
What we've done
Because
is
the
actually,
standard really isn't something that you have, this is a voluntary new standard, right?
it was a collaborative effort to develop a recommended practice. and
Should that
therefore a standard.
be more codified in regulations or law or something?
What I've said very directly and what we've proposed in our strategic framework is that moving to a safety management system is imperative for the industry.
Yeah.
The work that's been done on the recommended practice is a great step forward in actually moving in that direction.
But technically, you have no ability to enforce the higher standards of this sort of agreed-upon new standard, right?
We have not said that we're actually looking to regulate in this area. The first step forward is actually to, first and foremost, educate everyone, industry, all of our stakeholders.
Would you anticipate codifying in a regulation some of these?
I would never take codification off the table, but I think that first and foremost, we've seen in other transportation modes like aviation, that voluntary compliance is actually one of the most integral parts of how we collect data voluntarily, have a third party look at it, identify risk, and that is actually what will reduce.
And I support that. I think that industry working with the government regulatory agencies needs to cooperate. But again, you want the highest standards. You also want those to be met. And if you agree on them, I'm not sure how, if you develop some system to identify non-compliance with what they've agreed on. Just a last question. In the 2011 pipeline bill, and this might have been asked, I wasn't here, we put some provisions to accelerate the replacement of cast iron pipes. This is for Cheryl Campbell. And I want to know how much progress we've made since 2011. Has that been mentioned here?
Off the top of my head, I can't give you exact numbers.
Can you
Certainly
check
can
that, make it part of the
Absolutely.
record? I'd just like to see, you pass a law, you put in some new standards, and then you want to see what the result is. And we had some issues before, and we tried to put improvements in and work with the industry to make those improvements. And some of that was replacement, I believe, of the cast iron pipes. And if that can be made of the part of the record, I'd appreciate it. Maybe you can respond to that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We can do that.
I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Micah. Ms. Esty, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Denham, what am I doing? Chairman Denham and Ranking Member Capuano for holding this hearing on the reauthorization of DOT's pipeline safety program. This is what happens when you have 4 hearings before noon, so I apologize. I want to thank my colleagues, too, from California for their appearing today and really underscoring the important role we all play in ensuring the safety of the American public. In Connecticut, we know all too well the consequences that can happen from procedures not being followed. In 2010, we lost 6 workers with the explosion of a natural gas facility right as it was nearing completion. So we have important work to do, and I've seen the effects right in my own state. Safety is paramount when it comes to producing and transporting energy across the United States. And I, too, am frustrated, as you have heard from others up here, about the lack of progress in ensuring all of the criteria are being met in fulfilling the 2011 law. We need to be making forward progress on each and every one of those elements. And I hope that PHMSA and this committee can work together to improve pipeline safety in the United States so that we can avoid tragic accidents in the future. Before I get to my questions, I want to add my voice in support of ensuring that PHMSA has emergency order authority to to protect public safety. It just makes no sense that you lack this authority, and as we've seen, particularly with changes in the energy composition in this country, it is particularly important that you be accorded this authority, and I hope we can work together to ensure that that happens sooner than later. So, Administrator Dominguez, a couple of questions for you. In an October 2015 notice of proposed rulemaking, PHMSA indicated that it was considering whether to require emerging technologies to be considered when evaluating types of leak detection systems that are appropriate for a particular pipeline, and that PHMSA will consider in its report to us, to Congress, on pipeline safety, whether the use of specific leak detection technologies should be required. Well, I would encourage PHMSA to address this issue in that report, and I would ask you whether you know whether PHMSA is going to be addressing this issue when writing the regulations, and specifically, will PHMSA be making specific recommendations about types of technologies to be used in certain circumstances?
Thank you for the question. I believe you were you were referring to a rule. I believe it was the hazardous liquid rule, notice of proposed rulemaking that we issued in October of last year, which indeed required looking at leak detection systems for both new and existing hazardous liquid lines. So there is a provision in that notice of proposed rulemaking to do exactly that.
That's a question. I think this is, I know historically agencies understandably have been reluctant to specify particular technologies because the technologies change, but there are new technologies coming online that are vastly superior to what we have been using. And I guess the question is, are you going to either be specifying new technologies or at least setting standards that are in accordance with what new technologies now allow us to achieve?
I agree with you that there are emerging technologies constantly on the forefront of advancement. That said, one of the things that we're looking at as one of the mandates that's in the 2011 Act is looking at how we best address leak detection, but a good portion of that is also on rupture detection to actually understand the sensitivity of any particular line. So as one, we've been investing very heavily in the R&D on leak detection. About 10% of our overall R&D dollars that Congress has provided has gone to research and leak detection. Moving forward, we want to make sure that we advance and continue to understand all the technology that is emerging. And as we do so, we'll look to regulate, particularly on the areas that we think are very clear right now based on the data that we have, in particular on rupture detection, and then we'll move forward on leak detection.
All right, thank you very much. I think it's particularly important that we do support the R&D efforts, but continue to raise those standards, especially as we, again, are becoming more reliant on this for basic energy for so much of the country. It is important that we continue to raise those standards in accordance with what is going to best protect the American public. So please let us know if there's anything we need to do on our end to ensure that we don't lock in stone a lower standard than is possible. And I guess that's part of my concern, that we lock ourselves into the past rather than moving forward in a safer direction. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady. I'm Todd Rokita from Indiana, acting as chairman temporarily, and because of that, I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. No, I was actually next in line, for the record. Thank you all for your comments today so far. I'll start with Administrator Dominguez. Do you think that PHMSA has so many mandates, most given by Congress, that they have yet to meet, that we should look at devolving actually more oversight and inspections to the states? Now, I know that currently states have approximately 80% of intrastate pipeline inspections, but could that increase even more, or have we reached the limit of state capacity?
Thank you for the question, sir. I think that the Congress has clearly recognized the need for federal oversight of pipelines. And with the recent investment in the omnibus from a year ago, we got 100 new pipeline inspector positions. We've been not only hiring very quickly, but training all of those new inspectors. As we do so, we're also training a number of the PHMSA runs a training and qualification center out in Oklahoma City, and we are also training a number of the state inspectors. They really are our partners and help us do our job on a daily basis.
Thank you, but my question was to devolution. I mean, could they be doing more? Could we transfer more power to the state level instead of in your
I
office?
think that there is definitely a very significant role for federal oversight in this area and for the feds to continue to work with our state partners as we move forward.
All right, I'm not saying eliminate your authority, but should we give more to the states? Yes or no?
I think that the balance that exists right now is a good balance.
Okay. Administrator Dominguez, going on with your budget authority, 149 billion in fiscal year 15, more than double the agency's budget in fiscal year 06. What is that increase going towards?
Primarily the inspectors that we just talked about,
Okay.
and looking at how we would train them and deploy them.
Are you able to hire enough inspectors?
I will tell you that it's been a an interesting process. So 6 months ago when I came on board, oil prices were through the roof and competition was steep with industry to hire people. That's changed, and we've been able to really bring some great people on board, and we were able to reach our 91% hiring at this point in time. We're almost, like, we'll get to 100% here in the next, hopefully by the end of March. That said, I think, you know, the bottom line is the economy is constantly going to be changing, and we need to make sure that we're in a position, regardless of what the economic state is, to be able to bring people on board to serve in these positions.
So to that end, does your outreach strategy include, I'm going to get parochial here for a minute, does it include Purdue University? One of the best engineering schools in the country.
I'm familiar with the Boilermakers.
Okay, I'd suggest, I'm happy to facilitate a meeting if we're not applying. I think they'd serve you well, and they'd be thrilled to know that they have opportunities at your agency.
I'd be happy
And
to
that's-
work with you on that.
And to be even state inspectors, to my
Be happy to
previous
do that.
question.
I will tell you that I've had the opportunity in previous jobs to work with the engineering students from Purdue, and
Okay.
indeed, they do produce
So,
great,
yeah,
great
so
folks.
just a little seed for you there. And I don't know, maybe you already are. It was just an open question. So honestly, I'm happy to help facilitate that. Mr. Black, continuing on with my parochialism, I guess, my Indiana constituents appreciate the importance of energy delivered by pipeline, gasoline and diesel for driving, propane for heating and drying. But my constituents also need to know that the pipelines are safe. What industry-wide actions are pipeline operators taking to improve pipeline safety so I don't have to deal with this?
So liquid pipeline operators spent $2.2 billion in 2014, the last year we've collected data on managing pipeline safety. So that's evaluating those pipelines, inspecting them, and doing repairs when necessary. We operate under a full series of PHMSA codes on the operation of a pipeline. Title 49, 195, 452 requires an extensive integrity management program where pipeline operators have to assess pipelines that could affect high consequence areas and review the inspection results and take actions by pipeline accordingly. So there's a full set of regulations and of industry activity to continue to improve pipeline
Are
safety.
you satisfied with the record?
Well, our goal is 0 incidents, and we're never there. We're proud of the safety record now. We're the safest mode, but we're working to get better.
Thank you. I know I'm over, but before going to Mr. Lipinski, let me ask one short question to close this out. Mr. Santa, do you feel PHMSA has the resources and authority to properly conduct safety checks on the lines, or do you feel that we could be doing more? Is the industry taking steps to do any self-regulation?
First, I believe PHMSA does have the resources that they need to do it. As has been noted, their appropriation has gone up in recent years and is giving them that capability. Beyond compliance with the PHMSA rules, like others have mentioned on this panel from the industry, our respective boards have adopted safety programs with a goal of 0 incidents. We're pursuing those programs and getting out ahead of this.
Thank you all. Mr. Lipinski, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I want to start off by thanking Chairman Denham and Ranking Member Capuano for holding the hearing today, and I look forward to moving ahead with the reauthorization of pipeline safety legislation. Illinois is a key pipeline hub for crude, natural gas, and refined products, and certainly my district is home to many, many miles of pipeline, though my constituents really don't know that. Most people don't know that, understand that. Now, this means that they don't know how important these are, but unfortunately, a 2011 spill in Romeoville highlighted that there are pipelines there, and also highlighted that we need to have a greater focus, I believe, on safety and prevention. So I wanted to look at a couple of ways to do this. First, I want to look at the use of drones. Rulemaking on leak detection standards is still in progress, I understand. But new technologies are emerging that could make proactive inspections more efficient and less costly for operators. I also serve on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, where we have examined the use of unmanned aerial systems. I'm co-chair of the Unmanned Systems Caucus here, so I'm very interested in the use of these systems. At this subcommittee's April 2015 hearing, PHMSA testified that some companies are already using these systems, but I'm aware that obtaining the Section 333 exemption from the FAA can be a lengthy process. So I want to ask a question. Let me just open this up to everyone here, especially to Mr. Santa and Mr. Black. Do you think there's an opportunity for better collaboration between your industry, PHMSA, and the FAA to expedite the use of UAS for pipeline inspection? And also want to ask the administrator that question, if there more you think can be done on this. Mr. Santa?
Yes, Mr. Lipinski. As you note, a lot of the inspection of pipeline rights of way is done by aerial inspection, and so certainly the ability to use unmanned vehicles to do that offers an opportunity, and we in fact have talked to some vendors who have got some interesting technologies in terms of being able to really optimize that. In addition, remote sensing technologies can be valuable in terms of the types of studies that need to be done in connection with permitting for new pipelines. And as a matter of fact, there's legislation pending before the Energy and Commerce Committee in terms of authorizing that in specifying to federal agencies that they should accept that in terms of satisfying the requirements for surveys and inspections. So I think there is a lot of potential here to improve the effectiveness by the use of these vehicles, and we certainly would be interested in pursuing that.
You're absolutely right, Congressman. There are safety benefits that come from aerial patrols. Right now, PHMSA regulations require operators to conduct aerial patrols, but now, of course, they are manned. We'd be very interested in the ability to use unmanned aerial surveillance. Like you, I'm aware that one of the issues in the FAA rulemaking is the requirement right now that an operator stay within a line of sight. For long linear infrastructure like pipelines, that's not practical. So we would need some changes to the FAA regulations on UAS to be able to use those vehicles to patrol a pipeline. And we could accomplish great things by understanding if somebody is along that right-of-way getting ready to dig and didn't call the one-call program, we'd have that evidence.
Mr. Dominguez, anything you think can be done better to get this technology out there more quickly?
We've been working not only with our partners at FAA, but across the board to look at any and all technologies that are available for leak detection and other inspection capabilities. So I wouldn't take anything off the table, and I think there's opportunity moving forward.
All right, if the chair will let me go ask a second question, I'll try to make this as short as possible. I know that a big issue with is excavation causing ruptures to pipelines. The last reauthorization directed PHMSA to collaborate with pipeline operators to collect geospatial data to improve the accuracy of national pipeline mapping systems. So my two questions: do we have good mapping now? And let me just also throw this in there. Is there a possibility, everyone has a smartphone, does this give us more of an opportunity to use this mobile technology rather than, or in addition to the call before you dig program? Do you think that's a possibility to also have that opportunity to know where pipelines are before digging? Mr. Black?
You said or in addition to, and I think it's very important, Congressman, that any use of mapping to identify pipelines be in addition to the one call notification program. We don't want anybody to think that there's a reason not to call. If you call, there's a 99% chance that nobody's going to strike a pipeline. You can't count on the mapping being as good as those utility locators who spray paint and put out those flags and really help you identify where to dig.
I would have to say that it's critical, one, to make sure that the call is made for 811, but two, as we move forward on the National Pipeline Mapping System, we have indeed opportunity to improve with more specificity some of the maps that PHMSA presently, the data that PHMSA presently collects and informs the NPS system. So we are continuing to work on that and provide more data to that system. But first and foremost, I think the first line of defense is 811, but we also need to make sure that people understand what's there and then appropriately share it given security concerns only when necessary.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman. Gentleman's time's expired. We're going to have a one committee member round two. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Just being, a member of the LA County delegation here in Congress, I really felt it was incumbent on me to just ask a couple of questions about the Porter Ranch incident. While that's not in my particular congressional district, certainly in LA County, it's been a huge problem. Mr. Weimer, I was just going to ask you a couple of questions about that. And I appreciate my colleagues, Congressmembers Knight, Sherman, and Spear, for coming and talking about the devastations in their own districts as it related to pipeline and gas storage issues. So, Mr. Sherman has introduced a bill, and so has Mr. Knight. Now, Mr. Knight's bill, the PHMSA regulation would rely heavily on consensus standards, which in the case of underground gas storage refers to standards developed by the API. I know I'm concerned that these standards, about the way these standards were developed and whether they are truly the best practices or rather just an average practice of the industry. In your opinion, are these practices just a ratification of the current average practice in the industry? Should they go further? And are consensus standards generated by the industry the best way to identify adequate safety measures?
Well, thank you for the question. Certainly underground gas storage is not something that we focused on much. We think that from what we've seen of the recommended practices, that they would be a good first step. We think that it needs to go farther than that, and I think that's some of the difference in the language between the two congressional bills that have been introduced. So, if there was a way, maybe through emergency order authority, that those standards could be implemented as soon as possible, that would be good. But we'd like to see a regular rulemaking that would open it up so the public, academia, other folks could chime in and make sure it's as strong as possible. We've heard mention that there's concerns with the standards that are being pushed forward, that they don't include everything that needs to be. There's also some concerns about whether it precludes state authority based on whether such facilities end up being defined as interstate or intra. Because if they're defined as interstate, they could be precluded, the states could be precluded from going above and beyond what the feds.
Thank you. And my last question would be, Mr. Sherman's bill included a state non-preemption clause so that states have the option of implementing standards more stringent than the federal ones. Do you feel like California, states like California, should have the option of requiring measures like shut-off valves, pressure monitors, testing of downhill devices if the federal regulations fail to do so.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for indulging me for my personal second round.
I appreciate the gentlewoman's questions. Thank you all for your testimony. I say that for the committee members and on behalf of Chairman Denham. Your comments have been very helpful for today's educational hearing, and I'm seeing no further questions. I would ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing, and a unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for any additional comments and information submitted by members or witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. I would like to thank our witnesses again for their testimony today. If no other members have anything to add, this subcommittee stands adjourned.